Hello, my name is Dawn Shaw, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 21 of Friending the Mirror. And I'm really happy to be back. It's 2016. This is my 1 year anniversary, and as I said, my 21st show. And I'm so excited to be able to continue to do these for you. The title of today's show is Combating Stigma Through Cross-Identity Collaboration. And my guest today is Loretta Jay. Loretta is one of the co-founders of an organization, a nonprofit called B Stigma-Free. Loretta Jay co-founded B Stigma-Free in order to help create a kinder society so people with differences are accepted, respected, and included for who they are. Loretta has been an advocate for families and children for more than 25 years. Her consulting experience in comprehensive program design, implementation, and evaluation has benefited both nonprofit and public organizations. She has published, spoken, and testified extensively on complex issues regarding child protection, mental health, and specialized healthcare populations. Her current mission is to influence change in the world through Be Stigma Free, so all of our children will have a safe and compassionate place to reach their potential. Loretta, I am so happy to welcome you to Friending the Mirror, my first episode of 2016. So excited to have you here today with me. Loretta, could you start? I know I just read your bio, but could you start by talking a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Dawn and everyone. Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and congratulations and happy anniversary on your 1 year. I didn't realize that. I'm really happy to be here today to talk with you about stigma and what we can do together to make change. I started my professional career started way back when, right out of school, undergraduate. I started working in child welfare for the state of Connecticut. And I worked everywhere from the front lines up through overseeing different training and different staff at the Department of Child Welfare. And then I work with community providers working for the betterment of children and families, different community services. I did that for about 12 years. And then I started working with nonprofits and governments and consulting. And I did that systems-oriented program development systems, things like that. And I got a grad degree in community psychology, which is really, if you think about community psychology, it's a lot like, think about clinical one-on-one psychology and counseling, but for the bigger community. What does the community need to heal, to make it better? And it uses a lot of strength-based programming. And throughout that time, I've worked with lots of different organizations, volunteering, and as well as through consulting. And one of those organizations is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so I worked a lot with that organization in terms of volunteering on the board locally.
Well, that's certainly puts you in a good position to be starting up a nonprofit, especially one like Be Stigma-Free. So tell me, how did you end up? I know you're a co-founder. So tell me, how did you end up founding an organization like Be Stigma-Free?
Well, it was through the NAMI work. So my co-founder, Cheryl Houston, she and I are both board members of the local NAMI chapter in Connecticut. And it was all started after the terrible school shooting in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, which is part of our catchment area for NAMI. And to help our community heal through NAMI, we organized stigma-free activities, essay contests and art contests, and different community events to talk about stigma and talk about mental health, and really open a conversation, because people weren't talking about mental health. They didn't know how to talk about mental health. And those programs were great. We had wonderful attendance and participation, and the public got involved and politicians got involved. But we realized that we were really preaching to the choir, and the people who were involved outside of the politicians were people who already got it, people who already cared about mental health. So we, after about a year of these activities, which we felt were very successful, we started thinking more about stigma and realizing that stigma impacts multiple identities, of course, and looking for what do we all have in common? What does each stigmatized group have in common? And looking about how we were going about trying to impact change. How are we talking about stigma, and who are we reaching? We realized that we were not alone in our efforts to have conversations, that each group that focused on stigmatized identities was preaching to the choir. Everyone had their own message and their own captive audience. So just like in mental health with NAMI, our efforts were captive. We had a captive audience, but they already got it. So that was the beginning, when we started to really delve deeper into the intersectionality and of stigma of different groups.
Okay, so I think it's really important right now to address, what is the definition of stigma? How do you define it? And how, because I have to admit, I've looked it up, I've even been to your website, and I'm still not quite sure exactly what it means.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'm really glad, Dawn, that was one of your questions, because it's a word that we use freely, and it's out there, it's vague, it's hard to wrap our hands around it, because it's an idea. It's an attitude. Stigma is an attitude, and there's some people object to the word stigma. They think that the word itself is stigmatizing, and we with Cheryl and I, when we started the organization and identified a name for the group, we didn't agree with that. And the reason is we really see stigma as an attitude that leads to other things. And think about bias or discrimination or shaming. Stigma is the attitude that leads to bias or discrimination. It's sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's hidden, but it's the underlying thought process that someone may have about a group, about an individual, about a characteristics that someone has. So the technical definition is a negative attitude or belief about a characteristic of someone. And we're focusing on a characteristic that's a difference, because typically it's a difference from most people that people have this attitude about. I'll take it a step further, and talk about what leads to stigma, and it's frequently based on fear, and I could go on. So fear people may have this negative attitude, the negative feeling, because of a fear of something else, a fear of difference, a fear of other, a lack of understanding.
Yeah, I actually find that to be very common. In fact, when people stare at me or when they notice that I'm speaking, I very often do try to engage with them, because I personally have the belief that the way to overcome those kind of uncertainties and fear, which is totally natural for people to be wary of things that are different, but in order to be able to overcome it, education is the key. And when someone understands why I look different, or why I believe or feel a different way, when they at least have that explanation, it doesn't mean they have to agree with me, but at least they understand that for the most part, I'm just a person, and I'm a lot like them.
Absolutely. It's really, that's the crux of what our goal is to build understanding, to and we do that through multiple channels, through the website and through our other activities. We're a young organization, so we're just starting in terms of all the for all of our goals to reach our goals. But the core is building understanding and helping people recognize our commonalities, because one of the best things we can do is to see how what we all have in common and say, oh yeah, a little different, but a little bit the same. And whatever that happens to be is we can all relate to one another. We don't have to all agree with one another, but we can relate to one another and understand where we're coming from. You know, that old saying, you haven't walked in my shoes, and it's true.
So I know that some of the organizations, I think can you give some examples of some of the organizations that B Stigma-Free has partnered with? Because that will kind of help give people an idea of, when you're talking about differences, what kind of differences, because I know it's not just physical.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have developed partnerships with some organizations over the past year. 2015 was just the beginning of our reaching to new groups and organizations to establish formal partnerships. And so far we have 11 of these, and these have been developed very slowly, deliberately slowly, so that we can, so that they're authentic relationships, so that when we work together, we know each other. We're not just putting our names up there, but we know who each other are, and we really want to work together for our shared goals. So Islamophobia is been all the talk of late. So the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee is one of our partner organizations. Another organization is LGBT Centerlink, which they are the organization, like the umbrella organization over the different lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and gay community centers across the country. There's lots of different community centers that work on the grassroots level. So they bring all those groups together and act as a leader for those groups. Howard University has a coalition for AIDS-related stigma. So we're members of that coalition at Howard, and they're a partner for AIDS. Little People of America and Mental Health America are other partner organizations. IFRED is the International Foundation for Research and Education on Depression, is another organization. Obesity Action Coalition. The American Medical Women's Association, they're our first professional organization. They represent women physicians. And then we have two non-national organizations that are more regional, but they have a very a national reach, even though they are regional. And that's Each Mind Matters in California, and Philadelphia's Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. So those are our current partners right now, and through this year we'll be growing our list of partners, as well as strengthening those existing relationships and working together to combat stigma in a collaborative effort.
So what I'm seeing from this list is I'm seeing physical differences, developmental differences, belief systems and religious differences, sexual preferences. I mean, you guys completely run the gamut of, if someone can't be different, these organizations are the organizations that you partner with. And it's all about assumptions and biases, I'm assuming, that these are groups that people just tend to be, I think persecuted is a strong word, but at least treated poorly often by certain members of society.
Yes, and unfortunately, there's many more groups and identities that can be included and represented here. If you think about it, we all have a difference, and it's just that some differences are more visible than others. Some differences are more accepted, and I say in quotes, but accepted than others, or maybe some are more feared than others, and because it's more foreign to some people. But that's one of our challenges is, when we started off, since we started with the mental health background, both of us as co-founders, many people said, well, why don't you just start with mental illness, and then, you know, in a few years you could work up to the other identities. And that really didn't work for us, because first of all, it's being done. Lots of groups are talking about mental health and stigma related to mental health. We're one of them in our local catchment area, but it defeats the purpose, because we're still preaching to the choir. And how do we? So that's the whole idea about Be Stigma-Free. Although it is overwhelming when if I let it get to it, it can feel overwhelming to have so many different identities and feel the weight of the responsibility weight of all these different identities. It can feel like too much. We try and break it down. So each month we have a different spotlight. So on our spotlights, each month we focus on a different identity. This month, for this January, we are spotlighting socioeconomic status, and really working on poverty and the stigma that's related to differences of wealth, people who are low income or poor, and the extra challenges that they face and the discrimination that they may face. So by using our spotlights each month, that's very helpful to sort of keep us focused. We still include all identities, but we do an extra push in each of these identities through our spotlights.
Could you tell me, where do you talk about the spotlight, but where do you have that spotlight? Where can people find that?
If you go to our website, which is www.bstigmafree.org, B, just the letter B, no E and no hyphen. On our menu bar, there's a spot called Spotlights. And if you click on that, you'll see our current spotlight, and then a directory of, then we go to, there you go. We go to Spotlight on the top menu bar.
Hold on a second, I've got to get where I can.
You see it there?
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Okay. And then right there, you can see our spotlight for January. And right now we have one article on stigma and STEM. STEM is science, technology, education, and math, and the pursuit of happiness. And this was by Dr. Jocelyn Turner Musa. She's at Morgan State University, and she specializes in STEM issues and minorities. And this is a great article about recognizing how stigma towards people who are lower income, people who are minorities, are discouraged for participating in STEM, in the sciences, science, technology, engineering, and math. And as a result, the potential income is 26%. Get this backwards. STEM careers are typically earn 26% more than non-STEM careers. There we go. So it keeps people down in the lower incomes. So that's a great article. And then below that section there was other spotlights. You could click on any of those topics there and have a whole wealth of data and our resources for the other topics too.
Yeah, well, that's really good. Now, are you guys active on social media as well?
We are sort of active on social media. We have we're Twitter, we're Facebook, and we're Pinterest. And we're slow there. We know we're very small, so it's just trying to keep up with it all. So we do some. I'm very pleased with our Pinterest boards, which I think are underutilized by most organizations. I love Pinterest because through it, if we go to our Pinterest board, we have a board for each of our spotlights and for each of our identities, and then there are links to multiple, whether it's a video or it's a news article or some great piece of information that's out there. We link to it there as well. So it becomes another resource to find information. In addition to collaborating and creating change with our partner organizations, we also want to be seen as with our website to be a resource, so that we have, in addition to our Pinterest board, which is a nice destination to go when you want to look up something, we also have searchable database with regard to clinical research about stigmatized identities and about stigma. So, if we under resources, you go to research, and then there you can search in a topic, and it won't be if we pick out for socioeconomic status, since that's this month's spotlight. It won't be just information research about poverty, but stigma related to poverty specifically. And it's a pretty hefty collection of information for people to find.
Okay, so you were talking about, I mean, you're starting to partner with a lot of these different organizations, and eventually, I mean, you're going to work in 2016, you'll probably partner with a lot more. So how does the cross collaboration work? What platform do you need to try to get these organizations to be cooperative with each other?
So that's great. So cross identity collaboration is, we coined this term because what typically happens when groups work to address a stigma, say the stigma mental illness, the different mental health organizations typically work together with one another, and they all have the same common goal, which in many ways is a lot easier because everyone sort of agrees, but we're still reaching the same audience. There may be a broader audience because everyone has their own followers, their own groupies for their organizations, but they're not reaching new people who care about mental health. So cross-identity collaboration is, the idea is to bring together the different groups, the different identities, and use each other's networks to spread their message. So that we had our first, so as I said earlier, we're a new organization. We had our first event in November at Howard University. Howard University hosted its International Conference on Stigma, and we were very excited and honored to be invited to run a workshop there. So B Stigma-Free coordinated a workshop with, and we invited 4 of our partner organizations to join us. And so the organizations that joined us was Obesity Action Coalition, Mental Health America, LGBT Centerlink, and Mission Launch. Oh, I don't think I mentioned Mission Launch in my partners. So Mission Launch is another organization that focuses on citizen reentry, a stigma that people experience when they're released from prison. And so Mission Launch was the other organization. And we had our first public workshop where we started to talk about what we have in common and recognizing the shared experiences that these very diverse groups have, but they all shared a common experience, and recognizing that common thread. And we started the conversation. It was a moderated discussion. Garland Nixon was our moderator. And so we started the conversation about how do we use our networks, and how do we reach broader audiences. And just on the easy superficial level of social media, we now have 4 very diverse groups who are able to promote the event and talk about the event among their own circles and process. So when Obesity Action Coalition talks with their 50,000 followers and members, that they then can talk about mental health and can talk about citizen reentry and talk about LGBT matters, and in a way that will be heard differently from when those organizations talk about it themselves. So that was the beginning. And now this winter, we're going to be taking that to the next level and continuing the conversation and formalizing, and with these same organizations, our messaging, and how do we want to continue to spread the word about each other to our broader audience. Be Stigma-Free is, we're really a stakeholder driven. Our mission is driven by our stakeholders, so that what we're successful when they're successful. And so our goal is to make each of our partner organizations more successful with their messaging, and that's our success.
Yeah, well, and I guess it would take an organization that's actually interested in the differences of others. Because, I mean, it'd be very easy for one group to be totally within themselves, and because they have a lot of membership issues. I know that LPA, Little People of America, LPA, for example, I had a member appear on my show. And they have members that have a lot of their own issues. So what you need from these organizations is to be willing to listen and to share. I do know that from doing these webinars and from talking to so many people from different organizations or even just different experiences, you're right. We have a lot more in common. I mean, just because somebody has albinism or someone's a dwarf, it's amazing the commonalities in our experiences. We all get stared at. We all have comments made about us. So these are, and if you're even if Muslim, because Muslim, a lot of them have a certain appearance that they wear in public, that they show. People look at them and maybe and say, oh, this person believes a certain way, therefore they are different. So I certainly identify and understand. It also brings me to suggest that one possible platform, of course, for you would be to be doing online webinars, kind of like what we're doing, because there are platforms that allow you to have panels. You can have 4, 5, 6 people on a panel, and that way you reach all these different organizations and anyone else who wants to tune in.
That's an excellent suggestion that I had not considered. Maybe Dawn will be tapping into you to help us with that, because that would be a wonderful way, because of course Howard was wonderful. Our workshop at Howard was great, and it was great to have the live audience, but it's a lot of work, and everyone's budget is tight. If we could pull off a webinar with multiple people on the panel that way, I love it. I really love it. That's a great idea. And I have no idea how to go about doing it, because you're in this world that I'm not in terms of running your webinars, but this has been wonderful. And I'd love to learn more about that, and maybe you could help us with it.
Well, we will definitely talk privately about that, because this is not a technical.
No, not right now.
But it certainly could be something for the people who view this to be looking for in the future, because I think that would be an ideal platform for being stigma-free. And I'm not getting paid for this either. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about the importance of understanding commonalities, because I do believe that is a way to dispel a lot of this fear that we seem to have for people who are different. We've talked about organizations. Let's talk about individuals. People what causes people to self-stigmatize?
Oh, believing all the talk. I think a lot of it is when people hear it all and they see the bias or the discrimination, especially for, I think that when people experience stigma and whatever form it is, that it's easy to fall into a trap of believing it and to want to hide or mask whatever it is that they feel is that they've come to internalize. Let's take a hidden stigmatization like mental illness, which one can try and hide. There's a saying, where's my lasagna? My daughter and I were talking about this morning, where when someone has a mental illness, the thought is, where's everyone caring about me? When someone has a broken leg or they're in the hospital, everyone comes running, and how can we help? And can they bring the lasagna? And they send the get well cards. And when someone has a mental health issue, people aren't quite sure how to respond. And the person who has the mental health issue, who's not feeling well, may not feel so comfortable sharing what is going on with them for fear of the stigma and how people may treat them differently. So it creates this cycle that people, even if they know, they may not quite be sure how to respond, because is it not out in the open? And people who are experiencing it are not so eager to share for fear that it will have consequences.
Yeah, and that is I haven't covered hidden disabilities so much because my show primarily focuses on appearance, but you bring up some excellent points. And that is one of the things I do address a lot are assumptions. And people assume that because you look normal, that you should therefore behave or be normal. They have expectations of you. They make assumptions about you. And when you deviate from that, that's when people start to go, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? And definitely, I can definitely see where then people become more insecure about how to respond.
Right.
And of course, that just makes the person who has a difference even more.
It comes, it comes back to when we talk about, whether it's overcoming self-stigma or any stigma, focusing on our commonalities. What our goal is with Be Stigma-Free is to help people see themselves in others. So when you see someone with a difference, to help someone see themselves in someone else as a way of combating stigma and changing those attitudes and saying, oh, it's just like someone's home sick with depression and can't seem to get out of bed. It's just like when they're in the hospital and they broke both their legs and they can't get out of the hospital bed. It's very similar. See that if we could find that recognition of it's very similar, but because it's in someone's head, it's more difficult to recognize and to understand for someone who hasn't walked in those shoes already. But to say it's very similar to when you're in a hospital bed with 2 broken legs, or to someone who has a physical disability and it's not just an accident from that time, but it's always where they're in a wheelchair, for example.
Well, let me add to that basically what happens is people become very insecure, or people who are interacting with someone who has some sort of difference, they become insecure about saying the wrong thing. They're afraid to say anything because they're afraid they're going to say something wrong that's more hurtful or is taken the wrong way, or they don't necessarily know what to say to make someone feel better.
Right. Yes. You're right. That's exactly that's a fear. It's a different kind of a fear that can lead to, even for someone who may not stigmatize, but just doesn't know what to say or do. And, I think that a lesson is that it's always better to say something, even if it's to say, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't want to make you more upset. But I feel really bad, or that you're feeling this way. And I want to be able to help you, help me help you, or asking questions. I think that when we have the courage to ask questions and to talk about whatever it is that we're feeling, whether it's our discomfort at saying something and being honest, if we're all able to be real and be authentic about who we are and what our own discomfort is or our own fears are, that's a big step in that direction, to talking about it and to acknowledging our fear of saying the wrong thing, that we don't want to offend.
Well, I'm going to jump in real quick because we actually do have a couple of viewers, and welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us live. If you have a question for Loretta, or even for me, or just a question in general, by all means, type it into the chat, and we'll see that, and we'll make sure that we address that, because I definitely want you to have that opportunity to ask questions if you have it. So, is there any other things that you can think of that you want to add in terms of stigma, how people react, how people can deal with stigma, both people that might feel that they are being stigmatized, as well as people who may not be sure how to avoid stigmatizing somebody?
I think that for someone who feels like they're being stigmatized, depends on the environment and where one is. If it's certainly if it's something that's happening on the spot, you know, it's finding that respectful way to address it and self-advocate, because I think it's important that we're all able to self-advocate. But in general, if someone, I think, is feeling that they belong to a stigmatized identities and they're feeling uncomfortable, it's finding others who, a place of belonging, where people can feel a sense of belonging wherever that may be. And it doesn't even have to be, it's lovely if you find a group of other people who share that identity that you have, for that, oh, I'm not out here by myself. There's other people who get it too, just like me. That's a really important a sense of belonging to have, that we all want to have, of other people who get it and who've walked in our shoes. But I think that finding other people with a difference, but can also share your experience. And that's really the goal of what we're doing, is to help people recognize that though they may have a different difference, that it's a shared difference, and to being open to yourself and accepting of yourself, and then to use that strength to open up with someone else, and to find the courage to share what it is that you're experiencing, to find others to share that with you, even if they don't share that exact same identity. And that, I think, is a really important quality to develop. It doesn't always come naturally, and it's really hard to do, but it is a valuable one that can take us as individuals as well as a society forward.
It's one thing that comes up over and over again with my guests that I talk to on the show, and that is support system. And again, it doesn't have to be people, like, I could find support from people who have a different kind of difference. It doesn't always have to be a facial difference. I do want to ask, what type of resources, if any, are available directly from B Stigma-Free?
So from B Stigma-Free, our resources are, let's think. Well, there's lots of written resources. I mean, we have a blog, guest bloggers every month that are focused, most of the time are focused on our spotlight. We may have a guest blogger who deviates from our normal spotlight each month. We have a guest blogger this month, for example, that's going to be blogging for Martin Luther King Day, and his blog is about racism for Martin Luther King Day. But we have, as part of our resources, we have regarding identities, a wealth of information in terms of some basic fact sheets each month about the identity. We have the research, we have our Pinterest board and social media, and then we have our research and our guest blogs. So there's lots of information to learn about identities, as well as to deal with stigma related to each identity. On a local level, we are just starting to, we're right now looking for funding to develop local grassroots coalitions. So I did a lot of talking about our national partnerships, and that's our top-down messaging, in terms of partnerships. But no social change happens just with top-down. We need bottom-up to really be effective. So we're now at the point where we're looking for bottom-up grassroots coalition building, and that's, so once we have some funding for this, we'll have our pilot organizations, our pilot coalitions, and this is to have, similar to our national groups, local groups that will take place all across, the goal is all across the country, but where individuals can get involved with their group or in the broader group without having an identity to their existing smaller groups. The different local coalitions will come together and will do activities. As I mentioned at the beginning of our talk, when we talked about our NAMI work in terms of stigma, we had Stigma-Free CT, we had essay and art contests as an example. They could have their own essay and art contests, but not just reach one identity, reach all identities, and really have people come together and have a broader participation and impact. So that's if you go to our website, you go to Get Involved, and then there's Find a Group Near You, and then Find a Group Near You. There's right now the Southern Connecticut Coalition, and this is our pilot, and it's very small, but a lot of our stigma-free CT work is identified here with our media experience, our newspaper coverage, as well as all this fabulous essay contest and some of the art that we've had participation. But our goal is to have that developed in the next year or so as well, and have more coalitions. And if people are interested in starting a coalition, we have a toolkit to get started as well. It's available here, also on the website, and we're available for support.
So do you also have links to your partner organizations?
Yes, on our website, if you go under our work and then partners, there's a link, there's a list of all of our partner organizations with links to their website, a little blurb about each organization, and then links. And our coalitions as well. The coalitions would all have their website, a place on our website as well, for them to brand and link to their local organizations.
So we do have one question that's come in. It's from Kathy, and she asks, do you see society getting better in regards to stigma?
Do I see it?
Have you seen it?
Do I see it right now? I am very sad and upset at what I see going on in society, but I see that there is hope. I feel that we're coming to this point right now. Kathy, this is a good question. It's one that cuts to the core, I think, because I find that I see when we listen to the news every day, it's terrible. It's terrible what we see, whether it's fat shaming or it's Islamophobia, and to hear national leaders and presidential candidates talking about creating real policy that is discriminatory and based on stigma. It's very upsetting. So I am hopeful that we as a society are going to recognize that this has to change, and that we're going to make real change, so people will be kinder to one another, because right now we're not so kind.
So what do you see that gives you hope? Is it just what you know about human nature, or do you actually see physical examples?
I think that we're right now very scared, and we have to find a better way of, why am I having hope? Because I can't not. I think there's no option. I have to have hope. I'm generally a glass half full kind of person to begin with, and if I follow my career and my work over the careers and over my, I've been a professional for almost 30 years. You could see my volunteer work and where my personal experiences have led down certain paths, but we have to do something. There's no option. So the only way to go is up, and therefore we have to, when I see a problem, I have to take action, which is why we started B Stigma-Free, because we have to choose kindness, right? And we're trying to find a new way to do that, and to make it easier, to help people recognize why it's so important to do, and to help them overcome their fears that are leading to so much stigma that we see.
Well, I tell you, social media, internet, these type of things give organizations an incredible platform.
Yes.
Really going to depend on how those platforms are used. They can be used to make things worse, or they can be used to make things better.
Right.
I think that's
You're right, and we have to find the way to make it better.
Find the right people to put out the right message. So this is always a question I ask every single one of my guests. If there's someone out there who's feeling stigmatized, what is your best piece of advice? If there was something that they could do today, an action item they could start on right away, that it may take time, but if they could start now, what would you suggest they do to improve their situation?
Okay.
Their attitude.
So I think that the simple answer, which is be brave. and I don't mean that in a smug way. I mean that in a real serious way. Be brave to be authentic, to be who they are, because I think that it takes courage to talk about what it is and how we're feeling, and how we're feeling stigmatized, how we're feeling, I think our we could have Be Brave as the name of the organization as well, because I think it goes both ways, bravery. It cuts to it in terms of people who are stigmatized. My thoughts on how to deal with that feeling is to use bravery, use your courage to overcome those feelings and do what you know needs to happen, and to find that connection, to find that support system, to tell your story so that people will then understand and overcome that. And that same bravery is needed for the people who may be stigmatizing, because they need to be brave to overcome their fear that is the underlying cause of their stigmatizing behavior. So it goes both ways. So maybe we should change the name of the organization to Be Brave, because it works both ways so well. And I said that kind of seriously. But the B is, we use our B as in our action word. B is to be. We want people to be who they are.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I always encourage people with a difference to go out and just do things and not worry so much about what other people think. And I know that that's hard. And especially it's hard when people actually are taking some sort of negative action, even if it's just as simple as staring. It is, it's important that people just live their lives. The saddest thing to me is when someone doesn't go out, they don't go anywhere, they don't go out and do fun and interesting things because they're afraid. And also when you have on the other side people that are afraid to say something to somebody because, like I said earlier, they don't want to say the wrong thing. But again, I mean, we're all human. We all have similar emotions and feelings, and the more people who are different that get out there and get exposure to the rest of the world, the more common and the more accepted those differences become.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, Loretta, do you have any final thoughts, any final comments before we wrap the show?
Oh, Dawn, I want to say thank you to you for this opportunity, and to those of you who are watching. I appreciate it. And I think that we could all be brave together, and I hope that we'll continue to work together, and to others to find us on the website, and to share in our shared goals, because to do this we can't do it alone. We need others to get involved and to participate on the local grassroots level with our coalitions, with our partners, with our messaging, and for us all to be brave together.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you again for appearing. I know you've expressed that being on camera is a little bit out of your comfort zone, so I'm very happy to be able to get you onto the internet and to help spread your message that way. And hopefully, we can find a future for you doing that more. So, because I do think it's such an important tool.
Let's talk offline about that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but again, thank you so much, because I think
Thank you.
B Stigma-Free is such an important message to have, and I'm really excited to be able to share that and to get to know you. And I think the coalitions that you're forming and the organizations that you're partnering with are also, that's so important.
Yes, they're all great organizations. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Thank you. So, a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to announce before I go into my normal conclusion that I am just finishing up my third book, and it's called Facial Shift, and it is written for people who have experienced a change in their physical appearance in adulthood. So me, I was born with a tumor. So for me, I've had all my life to adjust. But people who have come by it a little bit later in life might have a little more time, a little more difficult time adjusting. So this book says, hey, you can do it. You can live a happy, positive life. And you can find normal romantic relationships and friendships, even if you look different, it's okay. It can be done. In fact, if anything, it emphasizes the most important part of being human, and that is beyond what we look like. So also, I do have another webinar scheduled, and I'm not 100% sure of the exact date. I do believe it's going to be on January 22nd, and I also believe that it's going to be at noon, but I'm waiting for confirmation from my guest. I do, however, know who my guest is. Her name is Samantha Walsh, and her area of expertise is disability and beauty. So I'm looking forward to talking to her about that. So go to the website, facinguptoit.com/webinar, or if you're not on my newsletter already, make sure you get on my newsletter, and I will make sure that you get information with correct date and time. And then, of course, there's always the replays.
That's great, Dawn. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your book. I'd like to put your book on our website. We have a bookstore. If I can put that on the website,
Thanks.
that'd be great. I'd love to.
I appreciate that. So, as usual, everyone, I'd just like to say, while it's just as important to be kind to others, don't forget.
We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
And thanks to the miracles of technology, there we go. I'm going to show the screen for a second. And then I will stop the broadcast because I love technology. I really do.